It was another tough night for Barcelona in the Champions League and another loss to Bayern Munich, but this one was a little bit different to those that preceded it. The general consensus was that Barca played very well, missed chances and were punished by a clinical spell from Bayern, and most of that is true. But as you know, we don't just take things at face value on this channel, we like to go a little bit deeper. So today we're going to analyse the underlying reasons for Barca losing this game, and at the end I'll give my opinion on how Xavi should address the single biggest problem holding this team back, and it might not be what you think. So let's do it. The first thing we need to talk about is what Barca did well in this game, and in some ways it lined up with the expectations from my tactical preview, which hopefully some of you saw. Barca were very aggressive in pressing Bayern Munich, although perhaps even more so than predicted, using that man-to-man system that we talked about. Barca pressed all the way up the pitch, forcing Bayern backwards, and extended that pressure to Manuel Neuer, who had very little time on the ball to make decisions. You can see how aggressive it is by the positioning of Busquets, who steps up to press Sabitzer, Pedri is tight to Kimmich, and when someone like Mane tries to drop deep, Koundé follows him. I'm very happy to say that Barca's press was well coordinated, and because of how aggressive the defenders were particularly, Bayern didn't have a single free man anywhere. When the ball went back to Neuer, he was forced to kick along pretty much every time. Now this is where a slight tweak in the Bayern system played to Barca's advantage. Rather than the narrow 4-2-2-2 that we talked about in the preview, Nagelsmann had Mane and Sane quite wide, particularly the latter in more of a traditional 4-2-3-1. The intent was clearly to isolate Sane against Barca's left back, which was Marcos Alonso, but the drawback was that they had less numbers in the middle to win knockdowns and second balls, thus leaving Barca's centre-backs 1v1 when Neuer went long. And for the most part, they were excellent in these duels. Araujo, Koundé and Christensen, whose inclusion turned out to be quite well calculated, won the majority of their headers, and Busquets was also winning his 1v1 duels with Musiala. Of course, on some occasions Bayern did manage to get the ball into the feet of their forwards, either by winning their duel or a quick free kick, or Alphonso Davies dismantling Rafinha, but on those occasions we saw a very competent response from Barca's defenders. We tended to see Barca drop quite deep and flood numbers in the box, and subsequently defend that space quite well. Christensen particularly really excels here. He's a fantastic box defender, his positioning is spot on, and he dealt with several of those crosses coming in. Alonso played well too, he didn't actually get beaten by Sane, and it was the same with Koundé on the opposite side. I mean, all four Barca defenders were very good off the ball in this game, so don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Another important detail was how close together Barca's midfielders were. That was always going to be crucial to stop Busquets from getting isolated. Once again, Xavi was key to the defensive effort, pickpocketing players and getting Barca on their way, and Pedri also did a great job limiting Kimmich. The point I'm trying to make here is that Barca were excellent defensively in the first half. Whether it was a press that forced Neuer long, or a recovery in midfield, or just defending well in the box, Barca really nullified Bayern, and that led to a lot of turnovers and yes, a lot of opportunities for Barca in transition. This is where Barcelona looks really threatening, whether it is through Dembele's ball carrying, or Gavi's tenacity, Pedri's intricacy, or Alonso's crossing. Every single one of Barca's big chances happened just moments after winning the ball back, and it's undeniable that Barca should have scored from one of these chances, and yes, they should also have had a penalty. And that's why I agree with the narrative really that Barca could have, or even should have, won this game. But, and this is crucial, is it good enough, or for that matter sustainable, for 99.9% of Barca's chances to come in transition? Because you have to ask yourself, well, what the hell were they doing in their own periods of possession? And this is where the narrative of the game starts to fall away, and we have to face up to reality. The reality is that while Barca nullified Bayern in the first half, Bayern also nullified Barca. Now, how can I say that when clearly Barca created loads of chances and I just said they should have scored? Well, that's true, but virtually none of those chances came from Barcelona's own spells of possession and build-up. And this wasn't because Bayern's high-intensity pressure stopped them from playing, like we predicted in the preview. In fact, what surprised me most in this game was Bayern's strategy off the ball. They weren't hyper-aggressive, at least not in Barca's third. What we saw instead was a sort of mid-block, where the fullbacks actually didn't push up, And yeah, the interiors were marked, but with Busquets in there, Barca had a comfortable numerical advantage in the first phase. It was very easy for Ter Stegen to find the fullbacks and play out pretty much unpressured. From here though, Barca really struggled to break Bayern down, who were pretty happy just to retain this shape and block passing lanes. Note though that this is a mid block, not a low block, and you can tell because Bayern's back line is still quite high. The plan is to keep Barca pinned in their own half, and any progression beyond the halfway line is met with pressure and serious restriction of space. And it absolutely worked. Barca created next to nothing from their own comfortable possession. And the frustrating thing is, this isn't because Barca don't know how to break down these systems. They absolutely do. They just weren't able to because a fundamental pillar of their game was lacking, and that's ball retention. And it's crazy to say that about a team inspired by Pep Guardiola and coached by Xavi Hernandez, two people that care more than anything about keeping the ball, but it's true. Barca weren't able to execute any of their footballing ideas, the triangles, the rotations, the quick switches of play, because they just gave the ball away too often, and in situations where it was completely unnecessary. And I hate to have to do this, and I'm sorry, but there really were two primary culprits, and yes, they were Dembele and Rafinha. According to SofaScore, Dembele lost the ball 25 times in this game, and Rafinha lost it 14. And from a number of different situations. Plenty of them were just taking too many touches in midfield and getting caught out, while others were trying to force it in the final third. Both are equally frustrating and damaging to Barca's chances of controlling the game. And this is a mentality problem, not just a technical one. Take Lewandowski's headed chance as an example, which again came in transition, but after the shot was saved and Xavi recovered the ball, Rafinha had the chance to recycle it and keep Barca on the offensive. But what did he do? Blaze the ball over the bar with a shot. This was one of the few times Barca had the opportunity to keep it in the final third and put Bayern under pressure, and it was completely wasted. Funnily enough, in a previous video, I highlighted an almost identical situation, and in that video I noted the reaction of Pedri, who was frustrated and told Rafinha to calm down. And watching this game back, I realised Pedri spent a huge proportion of his time telling his teammates to relax and just to keep the ball. Every time Barca lost it, he got increasingly angry, and by the 38th minute, not even the end of the first half, this anger had turned to despair. And there's two reasons why this is such a big problem. One, like we said, these losses of possession prevent Barca from having any control and actually playing their positional game. But two, it means Barca spend the majority of their time just chasing after Bayern. As you know, this team never really settles into a shape off the ball and presses aggressively man-to-man, and doing this all game is completely unsustainable. You need periods of possession and control to catch your breath and recover physically. Barca's midfield never had that, and it particularly took a toll on Pedri, which had severe implications in the second half. The data goes a little way to highlighting these problems that I'm talking about. While Barca had slightly more overall possession in the first half, it was almost exclusively in their own third. Field tilt is a possession stat that only measures touches in the opponent's final third, and by that measure, of all the actions in the respective final thirds, Barca were responsible for just 37% of them. That didn't get any better until it was already 2-0. You can also see Barca's lack of control illustrated here, as periods of low threat Bayern possession are punctuated by these big spikes of high Barca threat. It looks pretty good, but the problem is there's nothing sustained. And this lack of control opens up the possibility for Bayern to take initiative, and that's exactly what they did. So we will briefly look at that short period that won Bayern the game before discussing what Barca can do to address these problems going forward. I don't really want to dwell on this period of the game too much, but it's where the goals came, so we should probably cover it. The narrative that Bayern increased the pressure in the second half isn't really that true. Barca just got even worse at keeping the ball. For example, the corner that led to the goal was born from Christensen forcing a pass into Dembele in transition, instead of just relaxing and retaining possession. That attack then led to the corner and then to the goal. Of course, you have to do better from the corner. Conceding a set-piece goal in a game of this magnitude is unforgivable, but hey, there's not much to analyse. Alonso lost his man, and that's that. But following that, the response from Barca was a little naive and probably over-exuberant. These are really the moments in the game where you need to keep the ball and prevent the opposition from gaining a head of steam. Barca didn't do that, and more cheap giveaways by Dembele and Araujo, completely free of pressure, gave Bayern the opportunity to flood numbers forward. And if you do that, you're asking for trouble. Give them enough chances and elite opposition are going to find a moment of quality, especially when your players are tired from the constant pressing. As it happened, it was the exact scenario that we talked about in the preview, with Musiala in the right half space between the lines, and Christensen doesn't step up to close him. But honestly, even from here, it's an excellent run and finish from Sane. The thing is, as good as this move is, it ultimately comes down to poor game management from Barca. It's the area where this team needs to improve the most, and in this final section, we'll talk about how exactly they can go about doing that. I should probably stress, just in case I didn't earlier, how advantageous it is for a team to excel in transitions, and this Barca team can be absolutely devastating. Let's be honest, teams have won league titles and Champions Leagues by just being good at that. But one, it's not how Xavi wants to play, and two, it's not sustainable. This game is a clear indicator of that. Without controlling the ball, you give the opponents too many opportunities to hurt you, and you heavily limit your own creative players. And it's not as though this Barca team doesn't know how to attack outside of transition. Xavi spent the entire last season coaching positional play, and we saw some fantastic team goals as a result. That run of wins in the spring was full of precision football, triangles, rotations, and cutting-edge moves that tore through opponents who played these kind of mid-blocks. Barca have just lost a little bit of that this season, and possibly because they can lean on the pure devastating quality of Lewandowski and Dembele, for example. So the next step is recovering that and then being able to take it into games against elite opposition. We did get to see some glimpses of it in this game, especially after Bayern were 2-0 up and they set back a little bit. Some of those triangles started to appear, the quick circulations into big switches of play, and as a result, Barca could have scored on a number of occasions. So clearly the key is to make this more of a feature from the start of the game, and one way to do that is to leverage Barca's biggest advantage over everyone else, and that's Pedri. And yes, he should have scored twice, but he's still 19 and it's an element of his game he knows he needs to work on, but his all-round performances are so sensational that you just have to forgive him. One of the things that makes Pedri an alien is his extreme versatility, being able to play both as a deep orchestrator and a final third playmaker. But sometimes that actually becomes a slight problem. You'll often see, and it happened in this game, when Barca are struggling to break a team down, Pedri is often the player that drops a little bit deeper to give safe passing options, and he can do that. He's a passing metronome with pretty much 100% press resistance, composure and ball retention. The problem is he's too good to be restricted to these deep zones. Remember when I said every Barca chance came in transition? Well, there was one exception in the first half, when Barca actually played their way through Bayern's mid-block, and that happened when Pedri took on more offensive responsibility. He got between the lines and fed Lewandowski. Literally Barca's only chance in the first half that came through their own build-up. You also saw him drift pretty wide in the second half, taking up dangerous positions and becoming a genuine threat around the box, and this is exactly how you want to utilise him, as a final third playmaker, because he has the kind of quality that not many other players do. By the way, it's no coincidence that Ferran Torres plays significantly better when Pedri is on the pitch, because he can play as a runner/box threat rather than having to take on creative responsibility. Now, I understand why Pedri takes up these deeper positions. He's very good at it, especially while everyone else is busy rushing the ball forward. He's pretty much the only one being patient and keeping it ticking. But this has to change. Pedri has to be able to rely on his fullbacks, his centre-backs and his wingers to keep the ball, to refrain from trying to score with every action, and that'll allow Barca's most influential player to do what he does best. The other major advantage Pedri gives you, and this applies somewhat to Xavi as well, is his ball retention under pressure. Even from ridiculously tight scenarios like these, Pedri finds a way out, which often can completely bypass an opponent's counter-press. An action like this could genuinely be the difference between a 15-minute spell of opposition pressure and Barca simply playing their way out and re-establishing control, which is why it's absolutely despairing to see Pedri do this only for Dembele or Araujo or whoever to give the ball away cheaply. It just has to stop. If Barca are to take these criticisms on board and change the mentality in possession, they will be a much more complete team. And considering the way this game could have gone anyway, against an elite Bayern Munich, that is a scary prospect for the rest of Europe. So there we have it, a fascinating one. It's really interesting because, like everyone else, I was very complimentary of Barcelona at full time, but the second watch through did change my perspective a little bit. You can definitely see there's room for improvement, but if anything, that's a cause for optimism if you're a Barca fan, because despite all of that, they did still compete against an elite team, one of the best in the world, and coming from where Barca have in the last couple of seasons, that is a big deal. So anyway guys, that's all for this one. Thanks so much again for watching and for the support. There's plenty more tactical analysis to come, so subscribe if you don't want to miss it, and I'll see you next time. Take care.